The Kymbalion, the legendary apocryphal book of Thoth the Atlantean, Hermes Trismegistus, that survived the destruction of the Library of Alexandria and the objections to its provenance. We can imagine how many ancient books were lost in the fire of the Library of Alexandria, but according to tradition, the Kymbalion is attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, the scribe of the gods, quote unquote. He lived in ancient Egypt when today's humanity was still in its infancy, and if it's true, then it's one of the few Hermetic texts that survived the fire of the Library of Alexandria, and in a way laid the foundations of various philosophical, esoteric currents until our days. Now, Alexandria of Egypt is north of Cairo and on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and it was a city established by Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great of Greece lived between just about the time of 330 BC. So he set up the Library of Alexandria with all the known texts of the age, and it burned. Unfortunately, a lot of that was lost. Now, its full title in modern times is The Kymbalion, a study of the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt and Greece, and comes as a book originally published in 1908 by some who used the pseudonym Three Initiates from the Yogi Publication Society in Chicago, Illinois, and it has been in the public domain since 1977. It's said to be based on ancient Hermeticism, and its philosophies became fundamental pillars of the New Thought movement of the early 1910s. The three mysteries who wrote the Kymbalion chose to remain anonymous. As a result, there has been much speculation as to who actually wrote this book. The most common suggestion is that it was written by William Walker Atkinson, lawyer, merchant, publisher, and author, as well as occultist, American pioneer of the New Thought movement, or with others such as Paul Foster Case, Elias Tickling, and Michael Whitty. The book early claims to appear in one's life when the time is right, and includes precepts and ideas similar to those found in the book of Proverbs. It's also claimed that the content comes as a clarification of the ancient, unpublished Hermetic texts of the same name. This indicates the antiquity of the text, according to the tradition, as well as we mentioned above. However, many skeptics reject this side on the grounds that the Kymbalion, while synchronizing with a number of well-known Hermetic features, as a whole contains ideas of modern occult writers, especially those of the New Thought movement, to which Atkinson belonged. And somewhere there it gets confused, as it is not clear who influenced whom. It contains the principles of the universe, the 7 original laws that govern everything, and that were transmitted to people as a high technology by the god Hermes Trismegistus, or Thoth the Atlantean. For this reason, the set of various esoteric teachings based on these principles from the ancient Greek era until today is called Hermeticism. That is the science of Hermes. Now, the roots of this text do not stop at the Alexandrian manuscripts, but are lost deeper in the mists of history. The historical and philosophical reference made by the ancient Greeks to the text of the Kymbalion, so they attribute it, the Romans and the medieval occultists, are directed to Egypt before the dynastic ages, when the god Thoth, that is Hermes Trismegistus, reigned. Now, I do have a playlist of the Emerald Tablets written by Thoth the Atlantean, and in there is a description of the philosophy they had, also the very high technology. Not only did they have interstellar travel, they had interdimensional travel. They can zip from one dimension to the other. And he says the Atlanteans were abusing the high technology that God gave them, and it was only a matter of time before divine intervention would put an end to them. He says a lot of Atlanteans escaped to various parts of the world, and the first thing they did was build pyramids. And he credits himself with building the pyramid complex of Giza. And he says that his one of his spaceships is buried under one of the Sphinx in a Egyptian pyramid plateau. Now, Hermes became known in the West during the Renaissance when Marsilio Ficino translated into Latin the Greek text of the surviving Hermetic writings, known today as the Hermetica or Corpus Hermeticum. The text was a source of inspiration for the alchemists of the time and was kept secret, so the etymology of Hermetic knowledge and the word Hermetic comes from here. The most famous writing attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, it was the Emerald Tablets, and as I said, I have a playlist for you if you're doing something around the house or even exercising or cleaning, whatever. You can listen to them, and I think you will benefit greatly. It's a very good discussion point, whether it's philosophy or high-tech or history or anthropology or archaeology. Now, the most famous is attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. Thoth is the Emerald Tablets. The writings of Hermes were supposed to have been taught to the mystics by the Egyptian priests long before the time of Plato of ancient Greece. It's not easy to determine their age, but their deepest origins are lost in pharaonic Egypt. However, during the Hellenistic and Roman eras, the Hermes teachings of Trismegistus were Hellenized and acquired a less practical and more philosophical character, focused on mysticism and alchemy as a path to theurgy. This is how Hermeticism arose, as a movement of the lower social classes of occupied Egypt, which spread widely in the Roman East during the first post-Christian centuries. The Greeks who had studied in Egypt and elsewhere were familiar with the writings of Thoth the Atlantean, Hermes Trismegistus, but did not speak openly about them, observing oaths of secrecy. Esoteric philosophers and sages of all ages have spoken of such principles under different names and symbols, which are recapitulated in the Hermetic texts of the Kymbalion. They say that whoever knew and applied them faithfully could understand and interpret the laws throughout the spectrum of the universe in its 7 manifestations, because he would possess the magic key of the sevenfold wisdom. So let's see in summary, what are these principles that the ancient mystic sages spoke about and how they express the function within our universe? A, the principle of spirituality. Everything is mind, the universe is mental. Now we know that the scientists of heart math do tell us that even our meditation can stop solar storms or even storms on Earth. So this is the principle of spirituality. Everything is mind, the universe is mental. In other words, the universe feels our thoughts. This principle contains the truth that all is mind. It explains that all, which is essential truth, entails all external manifestations and phenomena which are known by terms such as the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that are phenomena of our physical senses is spirit, which in itself is intelligible and undefined, but which can be seen and expressed as universal, infinite, living mind. It also explains that all the apparent world or universe is simply a mental creation of the all, which is subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole and in its parts or units has its own existence in mind of all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. So this definitely has to do with quantum physics, doesn't it? And it says, this principle, establishing the mental nature of the world, easily explains all the variety of mental phenomena which occupy so large a portion of the public's attention, and which without this explanation are incomprehensible and in need of scientific treatment. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of spirituality encourages one to willingly grasp the laws of the spirit world and to apply them to one's welfare and progress. The Hermetic disciple becomes capable of intelligently applying the great spiritual laws rather than using them opportunistically. With the key of all the locks in his possession, the student can unlock the many doors of the mental and physical temple of knowledge and enter the same freely and intelligently. This principle explains the true nature of energy, force, and matter, and why and how they are all subordinate to the dominion of mind. One of the old Hermetic masters wrote many centuries ago, quote, "He who grasps the truth of the spiritual nature of the world is well advanced on the path to dominion," end quote. And these words are as true today as they were when they were written. Without this key to all the locks, the lordship is impossible, and the disciples knock in vain at the many doors of the temple. B. The principle of response. As above, so below. As below, so above. This is what the Kymbalion says. So that's where that phrase comes from, as above, so below. This principle contains the truth that there is always correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various levels of existence of life. The ancient Hermetic axiom is developed with these words, as above, so below, as below, so above. And the grasping of this principle gives one the means for the solution of many dark paradoxes and occult secrets of nature. There are fields beyond our knowledge, but when we apply the principles of response to them, we are able to understand much that would otherwise be unknown to us. This principle has universal application and manifests itself in the different fields of the material, the mental, and the spiritual universe. It is a universal law. The ancient Hermeticists regarded this principle as one of the most important mental tools that man was capable of using to set aside the obstacles that obscure the view of the unknown. In its use, even the detachment of the arrow of Isis to the point where a cursory glance of the goddess's face can be seen. Just as knowledge of the principles of geometry enable man to measure distant suns and their movements while seated in his observatory, so a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the unit, he perceives the archangel. C. The principle of vibration. Now we also know, let's keep in mind what Nicholas Tesla says, that everything is frequency. C. The principle of vibration. Nothing stays still. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. This is what the Kymbalion says. This principle contains the truth that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing stands still, facts which modern science validates and which every new scientific discovery is expected to verify. And yet this Hermetic principle was clearly stated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Egypt. This principle explains that the difference between the different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit derives largely from varying values of vibration. From all, which is pure spirit, down to the densest form of matter, all is in vibration. We're talking about the atoms, of course, right? In the higher the vibration, the higher the position on the scale. The vibration of the spirit, with a capital S, is of such an infinite degree of intensity and speed that it is practically motionless, as a rapidly turning wheel appears to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale, there are dark forms of matter whose vibrations are so slow as to seem akin to yesterday. Between these poles, there are millions upon millions of different degrees of vibration. From the living cell and the electron, the atom and the molecule, the worlds and the universes, everything is in vibration, is vibrating action. This is also true on the levels of energy and force, but which are of different degrees of vibration, and also on the mental level, those whose positions depend on the vibrations, and even more so on the spiritual levels. The understanding of this principle with the proper formulations empowers the Hermetic student to control his own mental vibrations as well as those of others. The masters also apply this principle to the mastery of natural phenomena in a variety of ways. Quote, "He who understands the principle of vibration had grasped the scepter of power, end quote, says one of the ancient writers. And this is basically what Nikola Tesla says. Everything is frequency. Now, D, the principle of polarization. Everything is double. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Same and unlike are the same. Opposites and similar are natural, but different in degree. The extremes occur. All the truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes can harmonize, says the Kymbalion. The principle contains the truth that everything is double. Everything has two poles. Everything has a pair of its opposites, all of which were old Hermetic postulates, and explains the ancient paradoxes, which have been so confused, which have been clearly stated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are terms identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. Pairs of opposites can be balanced. Extremes meet. Everything is and is not at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half-lie. There are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc. It explains that in everything there are two poles or two opposing views, and that the opposites are really just two ends of the same thing, with many different degrees between them. To clarify, hot and cold, through opposites are actually the same thing, the difference between partly degrees of the same thing. Look at your thermometer and see if you can figure out where hot ends and cold begins. There is no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms heat and cold simply denote different degrees of the same thing, and this same thing manifests as heat and cold is partly a form, variety, and degree of vibration. Thus, heat and cold are simply two poles of what we call temperature, and the phenomena that follow immediately after the manifestation of the principle of polarization. The same principle manifests itself in the case of light and darkness, in which the same thing applies. The difference consisting in the varying degrees between the two poles of phenomena. Where does darkness end and light begin? What is the difference between big and little, between hard and soft, between black and white, between the active and the inactive, between noise and silence, between the high and the low, between the positive and the negative? The principle of polarization explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can replace it. The same principle operates in the mental field. Let's take a fundamental and extreme example, that of love and hate. Two apparently entirely different mental states, and yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, and a middle point at which we use the term desire or dislike, which eclipse each other, so that gradually we are sometimes at a loss whether we desire or dislike or neither. And all are mere gradations of the same thing, as you will recognize, but if you look for a moment, and still more than this, and consider it of the great importance of the Hermeticist, it is possible to change the vibrations of hate into vibrations of love, one in his own mind and in the minds of others. Many of you reading these lines have had personal experiences of involuntary rapid change from love to hate, and vice versa, in your own case and that of others. And you will therefore perceive the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of the will, capital W, through the Hermetic formulations. Good and evil are but the poles of the same thing, and the Hermeticist understands that the art of transmuting evil into good, capital E, capital G, through the application of the principle of polarization. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principles will enable one to find his own polarization, as well as that of others, if he will devote the time and study necessary to the mastery of the art. E, the principle of rhythm. Everything flows in and out, everything has its periods, all things have a rise and fall, its vacillation, pendulum manifests itself in all, the measure of the swing towards the right as the measure of the swing towards the left, the tempo balances, the Kymbalion says. This principle contains the truth that in everything manifests a share of motion, to and fro, an inflow and an outflow, a swing back and forth, a pendulum-like motion, an ebb and flow, a high tide and a small tide, between the two poles which exist in agreement with the principles of polarization described a moment ago. There's always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a setting. This is in the affairs of the universe: suns, worlds, men, animals, mind, energy, and matter. This law is manifested in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and ultimately in the mental states of man, and it is with this that later Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. The Hermeticists have seized upon this principle, finding its universal application, and have also discovered some means of overcoming its effects in themselves by the use of the proper concepts and methods. They apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot nullify the authority or force it to cease to function, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon themselves, to a degree depending on the mastery of the over the authority. Capital A. They have learned how to use this rather than be used by it, and this and similar methods the art of Hermeticists consists. The Hermetic ruler is polarized to the point on which he wishes to rest, and then counteracts the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, which would tend to bring him to the other pole. All persons who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a degree more or less unconsciously, but the master does this consciously and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of sobriety, equilibrium, and mental stability almost impossible to believe, on behalf of the masses swinging back and forth like a pendulum. This principle and that of polarity have been carefully studied by Hermeticists, and the methods of reacting, neutralizing, and using them formed an important part of Hermetic mental alchemy. F. The principle of cause and caused. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Probability is only a name for law that is not recognized, and there are many levels of causality, but nothing escapes law, the Kymbalion says. This principle involves the fact that there is a cause for every effect, an effect from every cause, and it explains that everything happens according to law, that nothing ever just happens, that there is no such thing as chance, that while there are various levels of cause and causation, the higher one rules the lower levels, still nothing that never completely escapes the law. Hermeticists understand the art and methods of raising above the ordinary level of cause and effect to some degree. The mentally rising to a higher level becomes causes instead of effects. Masses of men are brought forward, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves, heredity, suggestion, and other external causes which move them about like pawns on a chessboard of life. But sovereigns, capital S, rise to the higher level, mastering their dispositions, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment around them, and become speakers instead of pawns. They help play the game of life instead of being played, and moved by the will of others and the environment. They use the authority instead of being its tools. Dominants obey the reasoning of the higher levels, but help guide their level. All Hermetic principles interact in a cause-effect relationship. The cause comes in and out of bonds with the effect. All manifestations are between cause and effect. Cause and effect derives its nature from the intercourse of creation. In this statement is condensed the wealth of Hermetic knowledge left to be read by anyone who can. And G, the origins of the genus. Gender is in everything. Everything has masculine and feminine in origin. Gender itself, it manifests itself on all levels, the Kymbalion says. This principle embodies the truth that there is a genus manifested in all, the masculine and feminine principles always at work. This is true not only on the physical level, but on the mental and even spiritual level. On the physical level, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher level, they take higher forms, but the principle is always the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will shed light on many aspects of a subject that has perplexed the minds of men. The genus principle always works in the direction of birth, rebirth, and creation. Everything and every person includes the two elements or principles, or this great principle within him or her. Every masculine also contains the feminine element, just as every feminine also contains the masculine principle. If you would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, birth and rebirth, you must understand the study this Hermetic principle. It contains a solution to many mysteries of life. We warn you that this principle has no reference to broad-based, pernicious and degraded lustful theories, teachings and practices which are taught under pompous titles and which are a debasement of the great natural principle of the genus. Such base revivals of the ancient disreputable forms of phallicism tend to destroy mind, body, and soul, and Hermetic philosophy has always sounded the note of warning against these degraded teachings which tend to lust, debauchery, and perversion of the principles of nature. If you seek such teachings, you must go elsewhere for them. Hermeticism contains nothing for you along these lines. In the pure, all things are pure. In base, all things are base. And this is from Kymbalion by Diamandis Phalligos Unscribed, and I've translated this for you from a Greek article concerning the Kymbalion. Please leave written by Thoth the Atlantean, Hermes Trismegistus. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box.